So every so often I get some search results for the term vegan, and various things come up. So I've noticed that there's been a much more usually positive search results rather than negative, as there was about 10 years ago. And I just wanted to talk about a particular article that I saw, and it's nothing in particular. It's not a good article at all, but I thought I would just take the parts of the various things that are said and break down some of the myths. And there's Rooney in the background. He has a Bird Be Safe collar on. No, we don't like to dress up our cats. So this article was The Vegans Are Coming. What's fueling the interest in plant-based eating? Okay, so that's October 3rd, 2019 on The Conversation. Written by Matthew Ruby, La Trobe University, and Tani Kara, University of Technology, Sydney. And that's Aoife. He's also wearing a Bird Be Safe collar, and he's our newest resident, a wonderful little guy. So if you see him zooming around in the background, that's because he's only 8 months old. Okay, so, and he might want my attention at some point, I'm sure. So between the rise of plant-based sausages and veggie burgers that bleed, in quotes, vegan protesters at supermarkets, and Disney adding hundreds of vegan items to its theme park menus, veganism is in the news. Okay, so the only reason that, firstly, veganism is an ethical position, it's not a diet, and unfortunately that's how it's presented mostly in the mainstream media, and by oftentimes people who are vegan, really. They present it as a diet or as a healthy lifestyle and all of that. No, it's an ethical position which rejects using animals for food, clothing, entertainment, and other reasons. And rejects their property status and recognizes their moral personhood. And that simply means that they're sentient and they're not a thing. So anyway, so, you know, the reason that any of these enterprises like Disney or any business is recognizing veganism, or rather vegans and their demands, is because they're capitalist enterprises and they will recognize anything that is going to make a profit for them. 10 years ago, that wasn't so much the case. There's been a steady rise in vegans on the planet that label themselves vegans. I don't know if they have an ethical position or whether they're a plant-based dieter or whatever. But meaning that if you're a plant-based dieter, then you're just dieting for health. You're for health reasons. But that's not veganism. But anyway, so the thing about this particular, you know, any business who embraces veganism is probably embracing it because they can see dollar signs. So he goes on to say, and gross is all I can say at the veggie burgers that bleed. I mean, I don't know why. I don't know why people want to do that. Why they want to make you know, sort of lovely plant-based things and emulate the suffering and killing of sentient beings. I don't know, but anyway. Not to mention the woman trying to sue her neighbors for their meat grilling ways. Now, this article to me indicates that they're picking out some sort of certain individuals that call themselves vegan who are, you know, doing extreme things, and that sort of indicates a bit of a smearing, as if you know, vegans are really extreme, and you know, I mean, you know, of course it would be bothersome if you lived beside somebody and the charred smell of charred flesh was drifting over. But I mean, it's until there's mostly vegans on the planet, you know, one's going to have to endure that. That's just how it is. And suing people isn't going to help anything. So that's kind of stupid. But anyway, for a group once perceived as placid and potentially anemic, now, I don't know why they think that any vegan is particularly placid or potentially anemic. I don't know whether they mean anemic in that they don't do much, as in they're not very active, they're not activists, or literally potentially anemic. I'm not sure. But vegans have sure been making a lot of noise. Now, I'm not sure what they're talking about, which vegan group they're talking about, but if it's the groups that are shouting at people in restaurants and that kind of thing, that often smacks of misanthropy, shouting at people in restaurants. That is not going to help bring them to an ethical position if you're hassling them while they're eating animal products. That's probably the last place that one is going to be successful, is hassling people while they're eating animal products. But there's the group that I'm thinking of, Direct Action Everywhere, who does that, shouting at people in restaurants and all that kind of thing. They don't even embrace veganism. They label it as some sort of personal choice or consumer choice. Well, actually, yes, everything we do is a consumer choice, isn't it? But it's an ethical position. Anyway, they actually put veganism down just like Extinction Rebellion. And that's because they have a donate button. That's one of the reasons why. They want a lot of people to join, and they don't want to challenge their non-vegan donor base, because they have a big donate button, and they want you to join. So asking people to go vegan is not something they want to do. They want lots of people to join their groups and then donate as well. So the term vegan, in quotes, was coined in 1944. It was coined by Donald Watson by a group of people in the UK to describe a diet excluding meat, fish, dairy, and eggs. Donald Watson, he died in 2005. It was the same year that I became vegan, actually. He died about quite a few months that year when I became vegan. He died that year, and that was kind of sad. And it said in 1988, the UK Vegan Society, and by the way, the UK Vegan Society is also another business in the end, and they promote humane animal exploitation and that kind of thing, even though their actual definition of veganism would not include that. And Donald Watson would certainly not approve of it, but there are different things that are problematic about that. Or rather, they endorse groups that promote humane animal exploitation, and there's no such thing as that, and it's not morally justifiable. So the UK Vegan Society settled on a definition of veganism that described it as, quote, a way of living which seeks to exclude as far as is possible and practical all forms of exploitation of and cruelty to animals for food, clothing, or any other purpose, end quote. So I'm not endorsing the UK Vegan Society. They've got some problems, and I don't feel like going into that now. So I'll continue with this. So for many years, veganism had relatively few adherents and was largely dismissed as a fringe movement, if not met with outright hostility. Well, that's true. 10 years ago, it was still, I wasn't sure. I've been vegan for 15 years early next year. And I wasn't sure about 10 years ago or 12 years ago that it was ever going to really take off. So I was very happy to see that it certainly has now. And I'm hoping that it's got a long way to go, but I feel like it's completely unstoppable at this point. I used to say that it was unstoppable at one point, but I wasn't quite sure, but now I'm absolutely sure. Anyway, so in his book, Kitchen Confidential, Anthony Bourdain didn't mince his words. Well, it wouldn't be surprising if a chef doesn't like veganism if they're used to cooking all sorts of flesh and animal products or whatever. He said, vegetarians and their Hezbollah-like splinter faction. Now that's a sort of a smear on, a Middle Eastern group. The vegans are a persistent irritant to any chef worth a damn. To me, life without veal stock, pork fat, sausage, organ meat, demi-glace, or even stinky cheese is a life not worth living. I'm sorry that Anthony Bourdain, who sadly killed himself last year, he wasn't a very happy man. I'm not sure exactly what was going on in his life, but I feel like if he'd been around for a while longer, he might have seen that there is endless possibilities with a plant-based diet. There's tens of thousands of plants, and there's like 5 species that people are using and torturing and killing by literally the trillions. 1 to 3 trillion land and aquatic animals are tortured and killed every year for totally trivial reasons. Because we don't need animal products at all to survive, we can easily meet all our nutrition requirements from plants and other non-animal sources. So the only reason we're torturing and killing these 1 to 3 trillion land and aquatic animals and destroying the planet is because we think they taste good. Well, that's really sad, and it's just not justifiable. We are destroying the planet, and I'm going to show you those 2 memes that I show every time of this largest study to date of 119 countries, 40,000 farms from farm to fork. And the conclusion from this scientific research was that a plant-based diet is the single most important thing one can do to address not only the climate crisis, but acidification, eutrophication, water shortages, droughts, land use, and all of that. So he doesn't even really understand, Anthony Bourdain, the difference between vegetarianism and veganism, because vegetarians still use animals. They're still eating dairy and eggs, which are results of tremendous violence, and they're still wearing animal products, and they're still using animals in general. So he doesn't even I'd be surprised if he didn't understand what veganism, what is the difference, but apparently not. And oftentimes these articles don't seem to understand the difference between vegetarian and veganism. They kind of conflate it all together. And oftentimes when people talk about veganism, and this includes vegans, which sort of drives me spare, is when they always talk about meat, as if dairy isn't a problem, as if eggs aren't a problem, as if animal products in general aren't a problem. It astounds me that people just talk about meat all the time. Anyway, so Bourdain was by no means alone in his view of vegans. And see, this is all a cognitive dissonance too, because really and truly, apart from a handful of people who are often misanthropists, and they go around shouting and yelling and screaming obscenities at people who are not vegan, most vegans are quite, they're just like they're just like everyday people. They just happen to be vegan, and oftentimes just our very existence really, really bothers people. Just knowing that you're vegan, even if you don't even say anything, if somebody knows you're vegan, it's like it's enough of a problem. And that's because of the cognitive dissonance of this cognitive dissonance in their mind, that they kind of know that what they're doing is problematic, but they want to shovel it all down because it's inconvenient. It's inconvenient knowledge. I mean, there are people who they just don't even want to hear what goes on in farms. They don't want to see what goes on in farms. They don't want to know anything because they don't want to have that in their head. That means they change their behavior. They'd have to change their behavior, and that is a problem for some people. They just rather not know. And then there are people who are just they like to troll vegans. There's a whole bunch of things, but really his problem, Anthony Bourdain's problem, is his own cognitive dissonance he had there, because I'm sure he was a sensitive person, sensitive enough that eventually things got too much for him and he killed himself. He was suffering from depression. He would have known the problems with that. I mean, veal, that's the result of the dairy industry, and all the veal calves are killed at a few days old, and they can barely walk. Billions of calves every year, male calves. They're no use to the dairy industry. So they're killed, and they're taken from their mothers, and their mothers are crying for days, and the calves are crying, and they're put on trucks, and they're crying all the way to the slaughterhouse. There's no food or anything to drink. It's either freezing cold or really hot, and these animals can barely walk. They're sentient animals. Then they get to the slaughterhouse, and then they're dragged across. They're still sucking the slaughterhouse worker's finger. This is the sort of, what are we doing? You know what I'm saying? What are we doing? And oftentimes when they use a medium in science, which is actually the blood of fetal calves that are cut from their mothers, dairy cows, at the slaughterhouse, and then a needle is injected into the heart of the still beating heart of the dying fetal calf, and a medium is taken out, blood is taken out and used as a medium. You see, if society was vegan, they would be fine. They would have found long time ago a medium that didn't involve that atrocity. But then, there's all sorts of atrocities done in experiments that are completely ridiculous and absolutely whimsical on all kinds of species, even the ones that you and I fetishize, like cats and dogs. And just look it up. Cats and dogs and all kinds of animals that we fetishize. So that's what happens in a non-vegan society. Anyway, so Bourdain was by no means alone in his view of vegans. And I'd say the author probably isn't vegan, I'm gathering. An analysis of stories run in UK national newspapers in 2007 that use the words vegan or vegans or veganism found that 74% of articles portrayed veganism negatively, quelle surprise, describing vegans as hostile, oversensitive, or ridiculous. See, when this is always an interesting thing, and something that I've known for a long time, is that when people when they start to do the ad hominem attacks, you know that they don't have anything. They don't have an argument. They don't have anything really. And that's what I'd say 98% of the sort of attacks I've ever had when I do vegan education. I've been doing it since I started, really, probably a year after I became vegan. The thing I've noticed is that 98% of those attacks are often ad hominem attacks. They have no substance. And you always know you've kind of won an argument when people resort to that. Or that they're just, when they start off with that, or when they resort to that, they're not interested in you really talking to them and having a sincere conversation. When people start with the ad hominem, I usually don't bother too much, because it's just a waste of time. So anyway, but I've often written stuff, because there's always an audience that's lurking. They may not be the audience that you're actually speaking to. Excuse the little collar. There, that's Aoife. There you go, Pops. The collars look a little bit whoopsie, but they actually work. They actually work pretty well. And we supervise their outings anyway. Although it's a little hard to supervise them when you're doing a podcast. Anyhow, that's Aoife. So anyway, so when they say describing vegans as hostile, oversensitive, and ridiculous, that's not addressing any actual. That's not addressing any actual content or anything. And also, they're probably picking people who are the kind of vegans in quotes, because oftentimes the people that are shouting at people in restaurants from these groups aren't even vegan, but they probably pick the most sort of outrageous behavior of a small few and label a whole group on that. That's the problem with generalization. So despite an initial bad rap, interest in veganism has been growing, particularly in the last decade. Data from Google Trends indicates the relative frequency of Google searches for vegan has approximately quadrupled since 2012. And 2012 was when my page died through Facebook algorithms, interestingly. A page I had about 58,000 people on and was getting 100 to 200 people a day, and then suddenly the algorithms hit in, and then that was the end of that. And it's been going backwards, and it's been going backwards since. Anyway, that's the frequency of searches. It's gone right up. A number of prominent public figures, such as Moby. This is another problem. People who talk about vegans, these celebrity vegans who are either not really vegan or don't really understand what veganism is, and they go back and forth. So I say this is always a problem, when you look to celebrities for some sort of moral guidance. I mean, they're all over the place. Look at Jay-Z and Colin Kaepernick. Colin Kaepernick was taking the knee and got pushed out of, the NFL, and then next thing, Jay-Z is capitalizing on business with the NFL. This is the problem. And Jay-Z before that was supporting Colin Kaepernick. Anyway, a number of prominent public figures such as Moby, Angela Davis, Bill Clinton, and Ellen DeGeneres. Ellen DeGeneres is, I don't think she was ever vegan. I think she was still eating eggs, and then she made a line of dog food or something, which was not plant-based, and it could have been totally plant-based. I mean, Ellen DeGeneres, and she probably wore leather, she's never really been vegan. Bill Clinton, he's just a plant-based dieter. He was doing it because he was killing himself with McDonald's and stuff. I have no idea about Angela Davis. I don't know if she's vegan. And Moby, I have no clue. I know that he does stuff for PETA and People for Ethical Treatment of Animals, and they're really problematic. They're all over the place. They promote single-issue campaigns that are promoting humane animal use and boycotts and bans and all that nonsense. Instead of just dropping all of that, but they're all money generators. These single-issue campaigns. That's why they do it. Instead of just asking people to go vegan, they use single-issue campaigns to bring in money for their organization. And that's why, PETA has, tens of millions of dollars, probably hundreds of millions of dollars. And the people like Ingrid Newkirk and the like are I'd say very wealthy by now. If they'd spent that money on just promoting veganism, the ethical position, they probably would have had a lot more. Most of their 2+ million supporters in PETA aren't even vegan. You see, this is the problem when you get people to discharge their moral responsibility by giving money instead of going vegan. This is what happens when you don't ask people to go vegan. This is what happens when you're always saying there's pretty ways of exploiting animals. You end up with a whole bunch of people who think that they can just give you money and they don't need to be vegan, but they can somehow clear their conscience and continue eating animal products as long as these animals are raised humanely. That's a nonsense. If these humane things were applied to humans, they'd be considered torture. And even if it was just perfectly wonderful, and I don't see how it could be, particularly when death is a harm when you eventually kill them, even if it was totally sort of the most wonderful farm and everything was great, it's still wrong. We're enslaving sentient beings and then using their bodies as resources when we don't even need to, and we're destroying the planet, and we're creating world hunger, and we're destroying the oceans, and we're destroying forests like the Amazon rainforest, and that's what is causing this massive amount of clearing of the Amazon rainforest is animal agriculture and soy to feed animals in feedlots all over the world. That's the driver of most of the Amazon rainforest destruction. You and I not being vegan, that's what that is. So anyway, when they talk about these celebrities, I just think how unfortunate. They're a terrible example of what veganism is. At the same time, numerous studies and reports have discussed links between meat consumption and health and environmental outcomes. And once again, this author is not talking about meat, dairy, eggs, and other animal products, and they're as problematic on the environment and on health and so forth. Watch the film whatthehealthfilm.com. It's a documentary. And also check out nutritionfacts.org. And please note any resources I promote except for my own, any ones that I mention except for my own, like howtogovegan.org. I don't endorse any of them really, because I can't say what they're going to say in the future. I don't know what they've said in the past. I don't know secretly what they're donating to, and so forth. I'm not sure. So I can't fully endorse anybody or anything, any organization. But if I mention nutritionfacts.org, it's because it's a great science-backed site about a plant-based diet and about animal products and the problems with animal products. It's fantastic. So anyway, media outlets such as The Guardian, NBC, The New York Times have run stories on the mistreatment of animals on factory farms. See, now this is another, I may have to do a whole video just on that sentence, because mistreatment, any exploitation of any animal, in using them as property, using them as resources, is mistreatment. Anything. Whether it's on a mom-and-pop farm or on these so-called factory farms. I mean, even the free range is a factory farm, really. It's just a big window. It's just a big shed with 20,000, 30,000, 50,000, chickens or whatever, and they might be able to move a little bit. They get a few minutes outside, and then they call it free range. There's still dead chickens on the floor who've died from diseases or from whatever. There's all kinds of problems. So this whole myth of factory farms, they're all like factory farms, just some are a bit worse than others. But they're all hideous, and it's all morally unjustifiable, because we don't need any of these animal products. So, the word factory farm is something we should ditch. And by the way, this whole idea that we should end factory farming, the reason factory farms exist is because it's economically efficient to have factory farms. Because the demand for animal products is great, and as the population increases and if there's more and more non-vegans, the demand for animal products continues to rise. And the way to do that, the way to address that demand, is to cram as many animals into these spaces as one can and fill them full of antibiotics so that they don't get sick, or try and reduce their stress with some sort of, they increase their growth with hormones and with antibiotics. So they're creating all these awful diseases that will probably jump to humans, like with the pig farming. They're going to be jumping to humans more and more, because we're very close to pigs in our we're likely to get zoonotic diseases from pigs. So there's going to be more and more of that. But the reason they have these so-called factory farms is to supply demand. It's simply, that's what it is. So it's never going to end. Factory farming is never going to end. Factory farming is never going to end. Never. Until we're all vegan. Because they're trying to meet the demand for animal products. So all these campaigns that these animal groups do, end factory farming as if it's all going to be fine with that, it's a ridiculous thing and it's never going to happen. And they kind of know that, but they're using that to raise funds for their organizations, to raise donations. They know it's never going to end because they don't ask people to go vegan. They're contributing to the problem. Until there's enough vegans in the world, factory farming will continue. It's just a simple matter of meeting demand. And this mistreatment issue is just a nonsense. Anybody who's focusing on the treatment of animals and not focusing on the end of the use of animals is problematic. Their position is problematic. We must end the whole property status of animals. We must end it by becoming vegan, and we must end this idea and change the dialogue from this whole treatment nonsense and how to make things pretty and how to make things humane and all this nonsense, and talk about the end of using sentient animals. Furthermore, popular movies such as Okja, about a young girl and her pig-like best friend, have been credited with turning people towards a plant-based diet. I'm afraid I don't watch things like that really, so I'm not really sure what that means, but I think I remember hearing people saying it was problematic. I'm sure it was. But, if people became vegan as in, the ethical position and rejected animals for food, clothing, entertainment and other reasons, then that's great if that's the case. Then it sort of says challenging stereotypes. As veganism, who actually created the stereotypes is the mainstream media. That's one of the main drivers of these negative stereotypes of vegans. So if the mainstream media, which is funded by advertising, if they are going to get advertising about plant-based diets or whatever, or vegan companies, then they'll start to change their negative stereotypes. And here's Rooney again with his Bird Be Safe collar. So, the mainstream media can actually turn around those negative stereotypes, which they have been doing because they notice that there's a growing number of vegans who they can profit off. So that is changing, but there's still a lot of myths and nonsense. This is full of it, right? And that's why I chose it. Oftentimes you'd be rare to find any article about veganism that's actually that isn't problematic in some way. So as veganism becomes more prominent, a number of people are challenging conventional beliefs, particularly the idea that one needs to eat animal products to be strong and healthy. I'm not endorsing Mike Rashid, but as far as I understand, he only eats plants. Now, I could be wrong about that. He's not vegan, even though he expresses vegan ethics. I think he does it because he's a bodybuilder. But have a look at Mike Rashid's page and see see the sort of muscle form he has, and that it's, as far as I understand, plant powered. So you don't, this idea that you need to eat flesh and dairy and all of this to get protein and calcium is just a nonsense. Where do gorillas get their plant protein from? Where do gorillas get their protein from? They get it from plants. We get our protein from plants. Cows and other animals get their, they eat plants. This is and they're big animals. It's like this is where we get our protein from plants. And it's much healthier protein. Look up on nutritionfacts.org the difference between animal protein and plant protein and see what effects it has on your colon, on your kidneys, and so forth, and on your body in general. Animal protein doesn't belong in our bodies. It doesn't. So there's more and more things coming out about health in relation to a plant-based diet, and as much as that's kind of helpful, as long as it's actual based in fact, it's still not. It still revolves around, health and diet and stuff, and that's not what veganism is. But anyway, at least there's more positive and what the health film I think is very helpful. I haven't seen other films. I find them really annoying. I also find I haven't seen some other films that are supposed to be about veganism, They're usually just about health, and they might pop in about a minute's worth of something about animals, which is kind of crazy. I find that sort of ridiculous. That's like talking about the Holocaust and only talking about the smokestacks and the pollution, you know, from the smokestacks in these concentration camps. I mean, that's how offensive it is to me that they don't really talk about animals as sentient beings and that we don't have the right to use them. Touring at film festivals in 2018 and reaching mainstream Australian cinemas in August, The Game Changers draws a mixture of dramatic footage, scientific studies and celebrity glamour. I don't know what that is, sorry. There's about 6 or 7 paragraphs here that I can probably just look at the last few paragraphs and skip some of that. You can check out the article. Motivation and location. Although vegans are often motivated by some combination of concern for animal welfare, animal rights, health and environmental sustainability, if you're interested in animal welfare, then you don't understand what veganism is. Really. I mean, animal welfare, as I said, if applied to humans, would be considered torture. There's nothing about that is respects the rights of non-human animals. If you're exploiting them and for the purpose of using their body or any other part of them, or using them as entertainment or whatever, then that's an animal rights violation. It's a rights violation, and it's not vegan. So anybody who's vegan and they're just focusing on animal welfare and focusing on these single issue campaigns needs to stop and just start promoting veganism, the ethical position. So anyway, so, you know, I'm sorry if I sound very cut and dried about this, but that's what veganism is. When it was coined in the term in 1944 by Donald Watson, he wasn't into, making animal exploitation humane and pretty. He wanted people to stop using animals. And they expanded on that a bit, but he actually even expanded on it at the time and said, he wanted people to expand on that and talk, expand on the idea of nonviolence. But this idea that, he would never have approved of this whole welfare thing and focusing on welfare. He just wouldn't have. So, and it talks about Greta Thunberg, a youth climate activist. I've talked about Greta Thunberg. Sorry, there's a bit of pollen in lots of high pollen count today, and it's getting in my eyes. I think we have a lot of flowers and all sorts of plants in Tasmania, and it just gets really crazy sometimes. Youth climate activist Greta Thunberg adopted a vegan diet for environmental reasons. Actually, that's actually untrue. I've even got footage of her saying she's vegan for ethical reasons. That means for animals. The footage, basically said she's vegan, and you can see it on Democracy Now! A couple of times she said this, that she's vegan for ethical reasons, meaning for animals, and she's vegan for the planet, for the environment and the climate crisis. And I've shown you those two memes, and that should be fairly clear. And back in 2009, the World Watch Institute did a study, and they said they initially said 51% of greenhouse gases are from animal agriculture. Check out Seaspiracy on Instagram and have a look at how insane it is what we're doing to the oceans and the animals in the oceans. Seaspiracy on Instagram. So anyway, so that's actually unfortunate that they can't even get that right. Youth climate activist Greta Thunberg, she's vegan for ethical reasons, and that's what veganism is. It says East meets West. Well, this is actually another problem too. Although veganism is often discussed through a Western cultural lens, several Eastern philosophies such as Hinduism, Jainism, Buddhism, and Taoism favor plant-based diets. Well, Jainism, a lot of Jains still eat dairy, and that's really problematic. It's still violence. Don't know about Hinduism. Buddhism, having spent a fair bit of time in Buddhist circles, a lot of Buddhists aren't even vegetarian, and that's just non-veganism. They push it aside, and actually a lot of Buddhists a lot of Buddhists in the West anyway won't even entertain the idea, and they use the non-vegan lamas, a lot of the teachers that are not vegan, including the Dalai Lama. They use them as examples of, well, if they're okay with eating animal products, then that must be okay. That's just an excuse, because it's very obvious that it's violence, and this prayer, may all beings be free of suffering, and they're sitting down to animal products, is ridiculous. and vegetarianism doesn't go far enough. So it's sort of ridiculous. And a lot of people make excuses for these non-vegan gurus, lamas, and then they use that excuse to excuse themselves when really they know that it's wrong. And I've even heard the excuse that, well, you know, there's a lot of speciesism basically in Buddhism, a lot of speciesism, as if humans are a higher rebirth than other animals. That is just human supremacy and speciesism there. So anyway, I could talk a lot more about that particular issue of Buddhism, but that's maybe I will another time. I think I know of some Vietnamese nuns who are completely vegan. I'm sure there are certain Buddhist nuns and monks who are vegan somewhere in the world, but my experience is that Buddhists on the whole in the West are very resistant to the idea of veganism, and maybe they'll be changing because the general population is changing. But that's very unfortunate. And anyway, so while in many Western countries vegans may be negatively stereotyped or face social alienation, responses to those following plant-based diets in other cultures differ markedly. I don't know about that. I'm not even sure really in India how many vegans there are, but anyway. It says here in India, for example, the present-day food hierarchy places a plant-based diet at the top as it is associated with a higher status. Well, I don't know what that means. Sounds a bit classist. The slaughter of animals and meat eating is associated with certain baseness and physical and spiritual pollution. Anyway, I won't go on with this, but it goes on about, you know, the different cultures. It says at the end here is the future plant-based. Today, countries with traditionally meat-based diets such as Germany, France, Italy, Spain, and South Africa are among the world's top 10 when it comes to the global share of vegan product launches. And I'd say that's probably just driven by capitalism. You know, it's just sort of the market recognizes things and recognizes a growing population, and they, like any demand, they'll try and meet it. So anyway, I'll leave it there, and I've said that before, but I mean that now. So anyway, it's the vegans are coming. What's fueling the interest in plant-based eating? I guess they didn't. Well, you know, that's the problem with a lot of these mainstream articles. There's a lot of, they don't really even look into really properly what veganism is, and then they take, you know, they refer to celebrities and stuff like that. It's all problematic. But anyhow, there's more and more articles coming out about veganism. They're kind of like this, but at least it's out there, and now it's not so much. I mean, say 10 or 12 years ago, you would just get just the most outrageous things and just really just basic smear jobs constantly. So that shows a change. Anyhow, that's really all I wanted to talk about. I thank you for watching. Please subscribe if you haven't already, and click the notifications bell to faint signals from Vega. And if you could check in every so often, maybe in a couple of weeks, have a look if you haven't heard from me in a couple of weeks. Have a look and see if you're still subscribed, because YouTube has been unsubscribing en masse any time I do a video about Palestine. Well, the last one I did about Palestine, 20 people dropped off, and I don't think it's because of the content, because I regularly do it. So I think that's what's starting to happen. I was approaching 900, now I'm back to 863 or something. It's actually sort of, I think there's been some sort of a clampdown because of my focus on Palestine and anti-war and anti-imperialism. But that's not uncommon for other people also on YouTube that focus on these issues. They get people unsubscribed by YouTube. I'm fine if people unsubscribe because they mightn't like. I often get people, maybe 1 or 2 people might unsubscribe every time I do a vegan video, and then there'll be somebody unsubscribe who's vegan, who's not interested in anti-war and anti-imperialism. I don't know why they wouldn't be interested in that, because it's all about non-violence, and it's all really, really important. But there you go, and they might unsubscribe. I'll get the occasional person unsubscribing because of something, but when you get 20 people suddenly after a video about something about Palestine and the rights violations towards Palestinians, then there's probably something wrong. So anyway, please check in. in a couple of weeks, and if you don't hear from me, you might be unsubscribed. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. Please go vegan. It's be one of the best decisions you make in your life. The only regret I have is that I didn't go vegan sooner. So thanks for watching. My name's Trish Roberts. Till next time. Bye for now.